Given the current state of things with rising costs and inflation, people are starting to go back to something called cash stuffing, also known as the envelope method. And what's interesting is not just that people are using it again, but why they're using it again in a world that's in the process of being completely digital. Nowadays, it feels like money disappears faster, feels less real, and becomes harder to track even when the numbers are right in front of us. This happens obviously every time we tap our phone to pay or swipe a card. And if you haven't noticed, the entire system around modern spending has been designed to essentially make spending feel effortless. And this is not because anyone is trying to personally trick you, but because just frictionless spending is profitable. That's it. The easier it is to spend, the more people tend to spend. And that reality has shaped everything from how apps are built to how credit cards are marketed to how checkout systems in your grocery stores are designed. Think about this. When you step back and look at it objectively, most modern payment systems are built to remove your awareness from the entire act of spending. You don't feel money leaving your hand anymore. You don't see it physically decrease, and you don't experience any pause between desire and purchase. Instead, everything is designed to be basically just instant and almost invisible. And the problem with that is not just, convenience itself, but what convenience does to behavior. Because when spending becomes frictionless, it also becomes emotionally disconnected. And when spending becomes emotionally disconnected, you guessed it, people tend to underestimate how much they're actually spending. But there is some good news. Even in a fully digital world like we are in right now, there are a growing number of people who are quietly utilizing cash for most of their spending. Not everything like bills, but the parts of their budget that tend to spiral out of control. At the core of this shift is something companies have known for years. When you spend physical cash, there is a psychological response that happens in real time. You see money leave your hand, and your brain registers this as a loss. But when you pay digitally, that signal is reduced significantly. So when the feedback loop is broken, spending tends to increase without people consciously deciding to spend more. And there are numerous studies that consistently show that people tend to spend more when using credit cards compared to cash. And this is because the emotional friction that normally slows down spending has been removed. Think about it this way. Nowadays, almost every layer of spending has, been optimized for speed. Subscriptions renew automatically, online stores remember all of your payment details, and mobile wallets remove even the step of pulling out a card. So everything is designed to reduce resistance. And when resistance is removed, spending naturally increases. This is not some sort of hidden secret or conspiracy. It's just how, modern consumer systems are built. The easier it is to complete a transaction, the more transactions happen. And over time, that shapes not just the individual behavior, but the entire spending culture. Now, for those of you who are curious about how this actually works in real life, the system is actually as simple as it gets. And that simplicity is, part of why it works. You basically just take your monthly income, subtract your fixed costs like rent and utilities, and then you just isolate what's left over. That remaining amount is then, basically just divided to reflect what your real life spending patterns look like eating out, groceries, entertainment, gas, and just other discretionary spending. The important shift here is not just the envelopes themselves, but the visibility that they create. Instead of seeing one large pool of money that feels flexible, you now see, a clear limit tied to a specific behavior. And as the month, tends to progress, spending naturally, reduces those categories. And that reduction essentially becomes the feedback mechanism that a debit or credit card doesn't replicate. Because when one category runs out, it creates an immediate decision point. Either spending stops right now or something else has to change. That moment of constraint is where behavior shifts happen. What most people notice when they start using the system is not just that they spend less, but that they become more aware of their spending patterns. Small purchases, start to become much more intentional. A lot of these impulse decisions, start to slow down, and the act of just spending itself becomes something that they think about in real time rather than, after the fact. And, this is not about perfection, or not using digital payments ever again. It's just about reintroducing clarity into parts of the spending that have become, quite frankly, just too automatic. At first glance, this might sound pretty restrictive, like, it limits what you can do with your money. But what most people often discover is the actual opposite. Instead of feeling restricted, they start to feel a lot more in control, because when you actually know what you can spend without, guessing or without permission, money starts to become a lot more clear. And that shift changes how people relate to money at a, basic fundamental level, even if they eventually move back to, debit cards later. So, maybe the real question is whether, the way most people are currently spending money is actually aligned with, the life that they're trying to build. Because if you feel like money disappears too fast, or like you're always slightly behind your spending without, knowing why, it might be a systems issue. And the good thing is systems can be changed. What's happening right now with this cash stuffing phenomenon is not a return to the past, but just a reaction to the present. People are rediscovering that when money becomes too easy to spend, it often becomes too easy to lose control of. And sometimes the simplest systems are the ones that reveal the truth the most clearly.